All right, welcome back. Now, as I've been telling you, Chriselda Lewis is outside the home of Arnold Pistorius in Waterkloof. This is where Oscar Pistorius will be living under house arrest. He was released on parole late last night. Chriselda, a very good morning to you. Do you have any more updates for us outside the house this morning?
Well, Leanne, as expected, the number of media has really been growing over the past couple of minutes. As expected, the release of Oscar Pistorius from the Kgosi Mampuru prison yesterday, a few hours before the initial date that was set, really causing quite a lot of confusion and really getting media houses to come here, and questions being asked to the Department of Correctional Services about why this was done a few hours before the date that was set by the parole board. But as that media continues to grow here, some of the reaction that we've been getting this morning is from the Steenkamp family. What we do understand is that June Steenkamp, Riva Steenkamp's mother, is not expected to give a statement today in reaction, of course, to this release. What we do know is that she will be preparing a speech that she will give at a Port Elizabeth school tomorrow. You would recall on the day that Riva Steenkamp was shot dead at the home of Oscar Pistorius at the Silverwoods estate, that Riva Steenkamp was scheduled to give a speech on violence against women. So June Steenkamp essentially will be giving that speech at a school in Port Elizabeth tomorrow, and the lawyers for the Steenkamp family are essentially saying that's what she's focused on today. But certainly it is a very difficult time for them as they come to terms with the fact that the man who shot and killed their daughter was released yesterday from prison. Of course, you'd recall the letter that they sent to the parole board, saying that while they may have forgiven Oscar Pistorius, they believe that the time that he spent in jail for killing Riva Steenkamp was actually too little. So with all of that confusion, the release that took place just a few hours before the scheduled date, I'm going to speak now to one of those journalists who we certainly worked with over the past year or so, covering the Oscar Pistorius trial. Certainly must have come as quite a shock to you, Alex Crawford.
I think it took everyone by surprise. I'd really like to find someone who did know that that was going to happen, because the Department of Correctional Services had told everyone, they'd even nailed it down to a time that Oscar Pistorius was going to be freed later on today, saying that he would be released from jail at about 2 o'clock. And then suddenly, we're told last night, I was rung up by one contact saying there's a rumour that he's already at home. Arnold Pistorius at that time was saying no comment, which every journalist knows means yes. But he wasn't. And the National Department of Correctional Service also seemed to be slightly taken by surprise, because they took more than 2 hours from when he was free from jail at 8 o'clock to confirm it. And then when they did, they issued a statement saying that it was up to the local management to take and make the arrangements as they saw fit. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why, because there are not only South African media in their hordes, but also a huge group of international media who've all been covering it from every step of the way and were due to see and monitor the next step of his release. And certainly in Britain, where my organisation is based, there is an absolutely insatiable appetite for everything that happens to Oscar Pistorius. This former hero who came to the London Olympics and wowed the audiences in London, and this tragedy that's befalled both him and the Steenkamp family, they just want to know everything about it.
But what has the reaction been so far? I'm sure you've monitored the response from the UK in particular about the release of Oscar Pistorius just less than 1 day short of a year, spending that amount of time in jail for shooting and killing someone.
Well, they're absolutely perplexed by the shortness of the sentence. They were pretty gobsmacked generally. I mean, this is obviously a very general view, because there is still a very vociferous body of people who believe that he's served his punishment, and they're very vocal on Twitter, as you know. They're very, very vocal and constantly reminding you that Oscar Pistorius has done his punishment, and they're obviously big fans and supporters of Oscar Pistorius. But the overwhelming majority, it seems to me, certainly from my inbox and And the Twitter that I get is that they believe this is far too short and they don't understand the South African justice system, that he can be out on house arrest, especially when house arrest is like this. A 5-star mansion, which is how one of the Steenkamp family friends described it. Well, he will be able to, although it's very restrictive, and you talk to psychologists about the mental problems of coping, it's still a prison because he will have to ask permission and his life is still not his own, and that's how the South African legal system views it. This is just taking him out of the criminal justice system and putting him into another location, but he is still serving out his sentence, although most people would think that was, a very, very nice place to serve out the rest of your sentence.
Do we see that interest growing? I guess the story starts again.
Well, I don't see it dying. That's the problem. It definitely isn't going away. And, they were even last week when the date was set, there was still this huge wave of interest. What's happening with Oscar Pistorius? Oh, he's being released from jail, even though he's going on to do his sentence. They want to know, now they want to know what type of community service is he going to do? How is he going to behave when he comes out? And talking to one of the criminologists who worked inside the Kozimampuru prison, she said that this is one of the problems he'll face because there is a big stigma attached to, not only because he's got a very, very high profile throughout the world, but also because everyone knows every little bit of the case. And now it'll be difficult for him, certainly for the South African authorities, to maintain that he keeps his civil rights, because despite everything that's happened, he still has certain rights, and there are certain things that are still meant to be private. For instance, his parole conditions. It's going to be very difficult in this atmosphere to maintain that privacy, though.
Alex Crawford, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure. Alex Crawford there from one of the international broadcasters, who's certainly saying that, the international media, the world's media, certainly surprised there, I must say, Leanne, by the early release. Just a couple of hours before the scheduled release this morning. Certainly, we'd made all the preparations, as you're well aware, to cover it from the release until Oscar Pistorius's conditions were read to him by a community officer, and then finally he coming to spend, or rather serve the rest of his sentence here at his uncle Arnold Pistorius' home. No official word again, Leanne, from the home yet, just 2-3 security guards standing at one of the entrances here at Arnold Pistorius' home. Not much happening except for the media, hoping perhaps that we might get a statement anytime soon from the Oscar Pistorius family. But for Reeva Steenkamp's family, they're saying life has to go on. They have responsibilities. And again, just to remind you that Reeva Steenkamp's mother, June, will be giving a speech at a Port Elizabeth school tomorrow in honor of her daughter, a speech that Reeva Steenkamp was scheduled to give on the day that she was shot dead by Oscar Pistorius.
All right, Chriselda Lewis, we'll cross back to Chriselda outside the home of Oscar Pistorius' uncle, Arnold Pistorius. That is where Oscar Pistorius is now going to be held for his correctional supervision now. But let's cross over to another point in Pretoria, in SABC's Sipho Steerman, who is outside the Correctional Services building in Pretoria. Sipho, again, I imagine that, as we've heard, I'm not sure anybody had seen that last night was coming with Oscar Pistorius being released overnight. I can only imagine there was a huge scramble of reporters to try and get to the story as fast as possible.
Yes, good morning. Yes, well, the plans, as we were aware of, he was going to be released here at Poynton. This is the headquarters of Correctional Services, where he was supposed to come through and sign his release papers and then proceed to his uncle's home in Waterkloof, Pretoria East. Of course, now the script has completely been changed, and we found out that he has been released last night and he's already at home. There's a great deal of disappointment from journalists that were here, waiting to get those famous shots of Oscar Pistorius as he walks out of the Correctional Services headquarters. However, there are still a number of reporters that are here that are just observing the scene and watching out for any activity that might happen. There are rumors going around to suggest that he might actually come through here and sign some release papers. So we are on standby watching for any activity that might come through. But yes, there is a great deal of disappointment that we didn't get to see him, but we're still monitoring the situation.
Right, Sipho, thank you very much for that update there. standing outside that facility. Now, just to remind you of the story, Correctional Services says Oscar Pistorius' early release was done after careful consideration of all factors involved. The department confirmed Pistorius was released at 7:30 last night, a day earlier than expected. Pistorius spent 363 days in the hospital wing of the Kgosi prison after he was found guilty of culpable homicide for shooting dead his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, back in February 2013. So let's just ask one more question to Sipho Stearman now. Sipho, I imagine all of these procedures have already been done. I mean, I don't foresee, as the Correctional Services have said, that everything has been completed, everything is sorted, and I don't imagine that anybody going to be going back there. Are these the reports that you're getting as well? All right, it seems like we've lost Sipho at this point in time. But we've also got one of our other reporters who we'll try and cross to a bit later on in the program, Manqoba Mkhunu, who is at the Kgosi prison. That's where Oscar Pistorius was held for the past year. And as you can see, this morning, everybody taken by surprise. Well, we certainly were. The fact that Oscar Pistorius was released last night as opposed to this morning, we were expecting that to happen early this morning. But obviously overnight, the decision was taken to rather let him go. All factors taken into consideration. That's all we've been told, that he was allowed to get early release on this one. On a completely different story, and this is quite an interesting one, I have to